Hey, and welcome to another Tea Time with Tommy. I have a very special friend here, Katie, who I've known Katie for about 3 years now. We worked together in Nashville through telehealth, of course, and now she is in the process of becoming a fully clinical social worker, which means she's going to be a fully fledged therapist, even though she's probably doing it already. So we're excited about that. Katie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Katie Vacanti Mitchell. I'm currently working inpatient as a social worker at a psychiatric hospital, quite different than outpatient therapy that I was doing when we met. Um, I graduated from University of Tennessee at the Nashville campus for social work, and I've just been working on that for the last 3 years.
Nice. So the reason I have Katie here is because the holidays are upon us now. And with this being my first 3 peaks counseling with doing Thanksgiving and Christmas, I thought about talking about boundaries. And as everybody, it's a joke. We know, like, I struggle with boundaries. And so if I struggle with boundaries, let's find someone that does a perfect job, the queen of boundaries. So, Katie, tell us a little bit about boundaries.
I don't know that I do a perfect job at boundaries, but I am always aware of boundaries.
Mhm.
Um, I used to have really terrible boundaries. And then I realized that they are a great foundation for just about any relationship.
Mhm.
And been working really, really hard on them. And I like to think that I've gotten pretty good at them. Um, I think boundaries are everything.
Yeah.
Boundaries are the way that we communicate. Yes.
Mhm. No, no, it's great. I mean, you're right. Boundaries are everything. Like, if we could put the perfect boundary in place, then it would help with so many of the intricacies of life that we struggle and deal with, especially as therapists and people coming in to see us and talk to us about the different things. If they had boundaries in place in the beginning, it would flow over to a more healthier lifestyle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think so. I mean, boundaries can be, the way that someone talks to you and what you accept or don't accept. Boundaries can be the way that you talk to other people
Mhm.
and the standards that you set for your own communication. But boundaries can also be the amount of like TV that I let myself watch or what kinds of podcasts I let myself listen to or don't let myself listen to. They flow into everything from.
And I love it. And we know, like, I used to actually, before I got started as a social worker, I was a foster parent, and then I became a house parent. And it was interesting because I went back to school because I wanted to help these kids out a little bit more than I thought I could do as a foster parent and a house parent, which, to any foster parent and house parent, I want to congratulate you that's listening, because that was the most blissfully stressed job I've ever had. And when you talk about a blur of boundaries, right, you're letting kids into your home and into your family system and family unit, and you're there to try to help them, lead them, and guide them. They're learning your rules. It's a whole lot of work that goes in to being a foster parent. And then when I became a social worker, some of those kids, I actually stepped out of foster parenting, and I actually, because of a small town, small community, I actually became their social worker. And so it turned into a whole lot of blurred lines, blurred boundaries, right? I was no longer your parent. I was your social worker, and I was still working towards getting my master's in social work. And I realized that because of my background, because of where I came from, my boundaries are a little bit more blurred than others. And so work, I know daily I have to kind of continue to work through those. So I like what you said about, like, it's communication. It's simple things as, like, how much TV do you watch, or what do you consume, right? How much media are we consuming nowadays? I don't know if you ever get those iPhone updates on your phone, says how much screen time have you had.
Yes.
Mine popped up this morning. It was like 20% more than last week. And I was like, I started thinking about everything I was doing on my phone. I was like, oh, let me go back and recalibrate my boundaries again, because 21% is a huge increase.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we have safeguards in place. We're more connected now than ever before, but those boundaries are important.
Yeah, I think technology makes boundaries a lot more difficult
Hmm.
because
Okay.
you are always available in some sense to
Yeah.
other people unless your phone is turned off. And I think we've kind of reached this point where I think a lot of people have kind of thoughts about someone being fully
Mhm.
turned off, or like turning your phone off every night feels like a weird thing to do and feels like it's not responsible. You should be available to people just in case someone needs you. But that's also not like that's going to affect your sleep. And that's also not a fair expectation to have of ourselves.
Yeah. It's almost like you need boundaries for yourself, so to actually be more effective for everyone else, right? If we're
Yeah.
too busy not sleeping and we're too busy on our phones, and part of, again, part of my struggle with boundaries, everybody laughs about it, but I actually was in crisis calls for about 10 years of my life. And so I had to be on call 24 hours a day, which again, it was a job I had chosen to try to get me to where I'm at now. But it affected my sleep, it affected my health, it affected, you know, my personal family and how I connected with them. So I know and I own the fact that I struggle with boundaries. We know that. So to be able to say, hey, look, these technology is not the best answer for helping you with boundaries.
I think it's like, I think that we should also mention that as social workers, I think boundaries and having boundaries is a very new thing because
Yeah.
I think when I entered school, it was a new conversation.
Mhm.
And the idea that like you should and you deserve to prioritize your self care and your well being just as a human person felt revolutionary.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking when I graduated, the expectation that was given to us, like you will work lots of hours,
Mhm,
make a little bit of money, and that's just part of the job. And
mhm.
so be prepared for that. But now there's this whole, I don't, probably in the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years, this whole concept of self-care.
Mhm.
It was not, there was no self-care conference, there was no self-care discussion when I was going up getting my social work degree, and I graduated with my master's in 2014. But there was no discussion, and that was less than almost 10 years ago, but still it was not a discussion back then. Now I'm actually, one of my jobs, again, boundary work that I'm working on, one of my jobs is actually teaching self-care to college students. There's a whole like unit that you can learn. Like we need people to be healthy to be able to be last in this field longer,
Mhm.
right? And in the research I did, there's 7 years most social workers burn out, quit, retire, go to get a new job because of all the work that you have to put into this job. But if you can learn how to take better care of yourself, I tell everybody it's a marathon, right? Not a sprint. You need to be able to make this last long and help others a long time, which includes healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I You keep saying that you have really poor boundaries, but I think your boundaries are reflective of the expectations that were set on you when you graduated.
That's a fair assumption. Actually, that's more than just an assumption. That is accurate, right? That was just what everybody was telling me would happen, right? You're going to be a social worker. You're going to just work lots of hours and just be prepared for that. I remember like the papers that we would get coming in and they were like, we're preparing you. We're putting you in the trenches. We're preparing you for all the paperwork that you're going to have to do, all the requirements you're going to do. You're going to learn how to balance out life, and you're going to have to learn how to balance out the responsibilities. But again, it's a new way of doing things. It's a new approach to helping our clients, because we're teaching our clients healthy boundaries by having healthy boundaries ourselves.
Yeah. And healthy boundaries are important for everyone involved, right? Like if someone makes a request of me that I don't feel comfortable with, but I say yes because I feel uncomfortable saying no, if it's someone who cares in any measure for me, they would be frustrated to know that like now they've unintentionally put me out because I just didn't want to say no.
I love that, because what is it, like just recently, Brene Brown, I watched a video of hers, and Brene Brown is like the guru of like self-compassion and boundaries, and like, like she wrote the like Codependency No More, right? We're trying not to be, we're trying to set the healthy boundaries ahead of time. And she talks about the boundary ring. And she says when somebody asks her a question, she turns her ring 3 times before she answers. And her thought process is the uncomfortableness of saying no outweighs the uncomfortableness of doing the thing that you're asked.
Mm-hmm.
And she gives the example of like, hey, can you make 5 dozen cookies for me tomorrow at school? And she's like, no, right? Reality is you can say, yes, I'm going to make the cookies, but then you're in the kitchen, angry at everybody, angry at your kids, angry at the situation, might burn half the cookies because we're in a rush. And then there's like this whole expectation, like you didn't meet it. And now you're angry at yourself and you're angry at everyone else. Or if you did meet it, you're still angry that you were put in that predicament. So like the boundary ring, right? Turn your ring 3 times. Think about it. Then answer.
Yeah. And saying no feels hard. And I think that's fair.
Mm.
When I was first learning boundaries and what that looks like, I developed like 3 phrases, like just a few phrases, and then I would rehearse them so that when the moment came, it felt easier to say no or to set a boundary, because like I already knew what that language looked like and felt like, and using it was easy. Mm-hmm. I'd already practiced,
Do you remember what those 3 phrases were?
I don't remember what they were, but I still have like a couple that like I do not have the capacity to do that, but I would love to help in whatever way I can. I think for me, I always like to have another option. It's like I'm saying no, but I'm still offering like something. Unless it's just absolutely a thing that it's an audacious thing to have even asked of someone, then it's okay to just like, no.
It's like, it is interesting, because there are times like, yeah, hey, can you do this extra work responsibility? Well, I mean, not really, but sure, I'll do it, like, and then you're staying up late, you're missing sleep, you're missing family time, whatever it is, because you said yes to it. I'm thinking about like my pastor's wife that said, if you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so no is a very small word, right? 2 letters, but it's one of the hardest words we can say. And I like the way you said it, like reframing it a little bit. You're not saying no, but you are saying no by saying like, I don't have the capacity for that right now. And that's okay to say that.
Yeah. So. And I think when it comes to like work things, it's okay. And I have asked for clarification on prioritizing something. Like, I'm hearing you say that like you want these three things done. I don't have the capacity to do all of these things. Can you help me understand your priority for which of these gets done so that I can use my time in the best way possible, right? I want to make sure that our priorities are matching up and that I'm getting the thing that's most important done. I will not be able to do all of these today.
I love that. I love that. Like, you know what? What's more important to you for me to get done right now?
Hmm?
What a concept! Like we're in this society that we're just kind of like, oh, we'll make it all work. We'll juggle, right? But if you're juggling, right, too many things get added to the pile of you juggling, you're going to drop something, and that's
Yeah.
not going to be helpful for anybody.
And you're also a human.
Yeah.
We can't get everything done all of the time.
Yeah, we're not robots, even though we are connected through technology in so many different aspects.
Yeah.
But we still have to take care of ourselves. It's kind of like when I do therapy, and I was really bad at this. I'd be like, oh, I could start at 6 a.m. and go until, there's 24 hours in a day, and go to 10 p.m. What I found out, yeah, you're looking at me like, Tommy. I didn't say it was healthy. It was what I did. Because, you want to help everybody. But also, is the 10 o'clock person getting my full attention that the person in the beginning of the day is getting, right? Are they getting the quality work? I would like to think so, but I also know that at some point I've reached my max capacity, and that's not fair for the person that I just said, oh yes, I'll make it work for you. So knowing your limits is really important in work too.
I think so. And I think sometimes we do, I think people who get into this work because we do want to help everyone. But I also think that sometimes helping someone is acknowledging that like you don't need me to navigate this. I know that it's comfortable and it's most comfortable to have someone else navigate that for you. I get it. I would love for other people to navigate things for me. It's great. But that's not the thing that's most helpful for you. The thing that's most helpful is to utilize this opportunity to use the coping skills that we've talked about and to access your own wisdom and your own understanding of your experiences.
Yeah, it's like allowing yourself to actually do the work that you know that you can do.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part, right? Like, I'm not here to see you 3 times in 1 week unless it's like a crisis situation and we can work through that. But
Sometimes
like,
that's needed.
yeah, sometimes it's a season, right? There's a season where like, but there's also the season of like, you need to do the work on your own. And that includes maybe setting a healthy boundary at your own job by telling the boss that's might be too much, right? Boundaries at work, so important, right? I would think most people spend now most of their days working, and then when they go home, they're still working. And I forget the research I just read recently that said that more people are bringing work home with them and working an extra 4 to 5 hours a night on the work that they bring home with them. And is that really helpful for you and your family?
And for your coworkers,
Yeah.
because then the expectation is that like, well, so and so is getting it done. So why isn't everyone else? And the answer isn't because this person is superhuman. The answer is because they're working 65 hours a week and everyone else is trying to work 40.
Yeah.
I always think of like who benefits from these things, right? Who benefits from, working over 40 hours? If you're in a salary position, you're not the one that's benefiting from that, or who benefits from asking something outrageous of another person. The person who feels uncomfortable saying no is not the person who benefits.
I like that. It's like the cost benefit analysis, right? The cost of it outweighs the benefit. One thing you mentioned, like this like idea of working so many hours, I think the 8-hour workday started because they were like, you get 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours at home, right? There's this like 24-hour in a workday, a 24-hour day, and we've lost that somewhere. So
I think part of where we've lost that is technology.
yeah.
Because it's easier. I mean, I think people were always able to bring files home and things,
Mm-hmm.
but like even just answering email at work, like you are still, or at home,
Mm-hmm.
you are still able to connect to the office
There,
just as if you were at the office.
yeah, there are, and culturally, right, as American culture, there's other places that have learned how to do more work in less time, right? I like the average workday is a 4-hour workday for, I think, like Japan, right? That where they've learned this like technology, this like technique of how to work in a 4-hour workday and get the work done in a very like good amount of time. But yeah, the idea of rest is so important in that culture when the American culture is like work, 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 work.
There's a book, I'm not gonna be able to remember the name of it, but I think they're really informed um how I look at work
Mm-hmm.
and what work-life balance means. Um, she really talks about like the evolution. It's by Celeste Headley. I just don't remember the name of the title. But
But
she,
what we could do,
hmm?
what we could do is we could put the title of the book when you think about it, we could put it in the comment section, so that works.
Sounds good. um, but she talks about like the evolution of work
Mhm.
and how it's changed and how we have this idea that like the longer hours that you work is better,
Mhm.
but what actually happens is that you're doing less quality work over that time, and that brains need rest to actually work most efficiently.
Well, the brain's like any other muscle in your body, right? You can like work out, you do leg day every single day, right? You're gonna hurt yourself. You work out your biceps there, you just like, right, you can get as strong as possible, but eventually you're gonna have to stop and give your body a rest. Same thing with your brain needs rest. So
Yeah.
so kind of moving into boundary work with families and the holidays, because that one's a tricky one to navigate also. What is your thoughts on that?
Um, I think it always depends.
Mhm.
Um, when I worked outpatient, the hope was that I've been working with a client for like a couple months before the holidays hit so that we could talk about boundaries. And when it comes to boundaries, and like at least my approach in therapy, I always wanted to try boundaries and try enforcing boundaries in smaller, safe interactions. So you get the feel of it. And then you also get the feel of what it looks like when a boundary is respected.
Mm.
So if you can have if a person is not used to be able to have boundaries, or at least not having like a healthy response to boundaries,
Mhm.
getting in the pattern of setting a boundary with a safe person and then having their response be like, thank you for telling me. Um, Let me know the next time you're available, or whatever the boundary is.
Yeah,
It sets the tone for like, this is what you can expect.
nice. Do you think compromise is a good part of boundaries?
I think it can be. I think for the most part it is. If it's something that's like, um, I don't know, if you were talking about getting, hang out with a friend over the weekend
Mhm.
and the friend says like, I'm actually not in a place to hang out with people, it's okay to offer another option. Like, I would love to try again next weekend. And then it's also okay for someone to say, like, actually, next weekend's not great for me.
Yeah.
Right. And then you engage in this conversation. What does it look like for both of our needs to be met?
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Right. Or if someone says, like, I do not have the capacity to do all of these cleaning tasks, but I can do the ones that you hate the most. And then someone else saying, great, I'll do the ones that you hate the most. And then we're both getting our needs met. That's valid, right? As long as no is respected, you can enter into a negotiation, I think, and still leave that conversation without having compromised your boundaries.
Ooh, I love that. Because even, working with, I do a lot of couples work, and even in couples work, they're like, well, he said, or she said, or they said, right? They're like this, like, well, why's it gotta be that way? Why can't we like make sure that both needs are getting met and both expectations are being discussed and communication is happening? Because communication is a good part of boundary work.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And I mean, having good boundaries, I think, is a loving act.
Mm-hmm.
I hate vacuuming. I hate it with it makes me grumpy. I
Okay.
hate with every fiber of my being. It's the worst. I hate it. My husband vacuums
Okay.
the apartment. He
Yeah.
has taken over that. He knows that I hate it. It's going to make me grumpy.
Yeah.
But I do the laundry, and I'm very strict about, like, this is how we fold the laundry. So
Mm-hmm.
I take over the laundry, and he hates the laundry. So we negotiate which tasks
Ooh.
are within our wheelhouse, because
Yeah.
they all have to get done.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like an option to just, like, great, we're not going to vacuum. We have a golden doodle. There's a lot of hair. That's not an option for us. So we can negotiate who does what.
I love that. Negotiation is a big part of boundary work, right? Negotiating, right? Making it work. Like you said, like laundry, right? I enjoy doing laundry, but my wife can do the towels, right? I'll do everything else. She does the towels. So we split the load a little bit, 50-50. We figure out what works for everybody. And especially when we were doing foster care and group work, group homework with, like, we have 15 kids. Do you know how much, like, that washer and dryer was constantly going. The two washers and the two dryers were constantly going. And then there were times that I was doing laundry, she was cooking dinner, right? We were doing homework, and like we would like divide and conquer, but we had to communicate. We didn't just assume, and that's where, like, I think a lot of people get mixed communication is when they just assume that this is okay, right? I just assume that they always take out the trash. So that's just one of those rules that nobody ever discusses, but it's expected they'll take out the trash. Maybe they don't like taking out the trash. Maybe that's a communication that needs to happen. So
If it is, I think an important part of boundaries is, like, knowing your expectations
mm-hmm.
and communicating those expectations. If you know that someone not putting out the trash is going to really tick you off in the morning, maybe that's a thing that you communicate so they know what that expectation is moving forward. Because if it's going to be a fight, I want it to be a fight knowing, like, I want you to go into it knowing that we were going to fight about it. Because I've already communicated what my expectation is.
I love that. Expectations and negotiations. That's a big part of boundary work. So what about the holidays? I know
Yeah.
we've talked about this before because you've had some, clients that you've worked with on how to do healthy negotiation and healthy balancing of the holidays. What does boundary look like during the holidays?
I think conversational boundaries tend to be a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Most of the time, people know the pain points of boundaries that are going to be pressed
Okay.
during holiday interactions, right? If you know that your uncle bringing up politics is going to just, like, derail the entire evening, it's okay for your boundary to be, we're not going to talk about politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think going into it, knowing what that expectation is, that's the most important part. Because you can't set a boundary that like you don't know. And also it's going to be difficult. Do the work on like ahead of time to set you up for success.
I love that. Like the hot button topics, right? Like politics, religion, sports, some people, right? Those are the hot button topics that you're like, let's discuss, like, let's prepare myself before we go into it, knowing that this might not be a topic up for discussion, right? That you might not want to engage in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's when you've been able to identify those things,
mm-hmm.
It is okay to tell people going into it, I'm not talking about politics.
Yeah.
Or I'm not talking about sports. I got a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. I'm going to fight. Or I just can't do it. I've been talking about it nonstop for the last year. I cannot talk about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about this.
I just want to come here and enjoy Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
Just enjoy Thanksgiving dinner. Let's talk about the yams, right?
There's so many other things to talk about, right? And I think I like to set a boundary for everyone first, so it's not targeted,
mm-hmm.
right? Because if you say like, I can talk about politics with anyone but you.
Yes.
That I would be really upset about that, right? So I think blanket boundaries are okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not talking about politics at all. I'm not talking about sports at all this holiday season. But I would love to talk with you about anything else.
Yeah.
Right? Then we have that negotiation, right? I'm not asking to not talk to you at all. I'm just saying this is the limitation of this conversation. What else can we talk about? Tell me how your kids are doing. How was so-and-so's recital? Whatever that looks like for your family dynamic, find other things that you can talk about.
Love that. That's awesome. And especially, right, you're looking, we're in this age of like blended families. We got extended families. We've got, families we haven't seen in a while. Like there's this whole like dynamics that happen during the holidays that has the potential for hurt feelings or negative reactions. And if we go in knowing this is what our limitations are going to be, it actually makes that better for everyone coming in.
Yeah. Everyone knows what the expectation is going forward, right? And once you've set that blanket boundary with everyone, then if someone were to disrespect that boundary, you can remind them of the boundary that you've already set, right? Like, oh, remember I said we're not talking about politics or sports. What else can we talk about?
Awesome.
Right? And you've already said it, right? If you know that someone is like, there is one person in your family that is just going to disrespect boundaries left, right, and center, you've already communicated with everyone that this is the expectation without targeting this person. And then when they do disrespect that boundary, you just remind them that you've already set that boundary and that that's what the expectation is.
Yeah, if you're
yeah.
I was going to say, if you're going in with your partner, maybe having your partner be prepared to help you with that, like that one person in the family that wants to bring all that up, that you're like, hey, like, send me a text. Just come tell me to help outside with something, whatever, just kind of pull me away from that. So
I think if there's a supportive partner, I think having a code phrase is really helpful.
Oh yeah.
Right? If they hear you say like, I don't know, bananas out of context, then they know that like maybe it's time to tell you that like I need help with something. Good. And get you out of that conversation.
Good. That's a great way to do that. That's a great way to navigate those tricky conversations. So one thing I also wanted to bring up about boundaries was boundaries with technology, because I know you did a big study on the difference technology and how technology needs to have strict boundaries in place, especially for different age groups, right? Say you're a parent of, I have a lot of parents that watch and they, they're technology for their kids, their teenagers, right? Technology or boundaries for self. Could you go into that a little bit?
I think, what I found is that the algorithms that social media use, one, really make it difficult to not be paying attention,
Mm.
right? They give you so many dopamine hits that like it becomes addictive. And two, because they're trying to get attention, they can really benefit from creating like anxieties or concerns. So, showing content that kind of pulls you into this, into these rabbit holes
Mm-hmm.
that don't benefit your well-being, like dieting culture, kind of how to lose weight when maybe it's not appropriate, um, ways to hide that you're losing weight or that you're not eating as much from parents or family or people who would be interested in that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they can also send you down rabbit holes that make you think that you have some sort of mental health condition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they'll pull some things that feel like symptoms of like autism or ADHD and kind of, because the videos are repeated,
Mm-hmm.
make it seem like this is all that there is to ADHD or all that there is to autism. You have to have this diagnosis, right? If you feel like awkward in situations and like maybe you have autism, and it feeds you down that rabbit hole, and it can really warp how you see yourself, how you see your place in the world. And to be clear, like, social media has a lot of strengths. I don't
Yeah.
think the answer is to like not ever be engaged,
Oh yeah.
but I also think having an idea of what is being fed to people who are vulnerable, who might not fully realize that these things are so much more complex than is being portrayed on a 1 minute video.
Yeah. Well, the 1 minute video turns into like 20 1 minute videos before long, right? That's the way the algorithm works. We know that, right? It's like, oh, there was a study, and maybe you could help me. There was like basically somebody was like, let's Google how to get over my boyfriend. Like I broke up with my boyfriend, how to get over that. And then that led to depression, and that led to I have depression, and that led to self-harming and suicidality. It just had a trickle down effect, which is scary to think about. But they said they basically did that research, they did it, and they watched where the algorithm took them, and it was very scary, the approach that happened with that.
I think the Wall Street Journal, if I'm remembering correctly, created different bots, like different bot accounts with
Mm-hmm.
different like age groups and different profiles, and just watched what it was fed.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them ended up on like the far right. Some of them ended up in like kind of a really toxic masculinity space.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of accounts that belonged to young women, adolescent, teenage girls were really quickly introduced to diet
Mm-hmm.
material, which wasn't just how to, you know, eat healthy.
Yeah.
It was how to restrict your eating and how to hide it from people and how to lose weight, and videos of people critiquing their own bodies, which then of course makes you think, well, if my body looks like that and those are the things that are wrong with their body, that's also wrong with my body.
Mm-hmm. So how does a parent help build healthy boundaries surrounding that?
I think it's hard. I
Yeah.
am not a parent. as a person who is not a parent, but has been a youth, I think it's important to be aware
Mhm.
of what's being shown
Mhm.
to kids, but also kids deserve to have their boundaries respected as well,
Yeah.
right? And an approach of you can only engage in social media or in this kind of thing with me being present, I think could really turn into behavior of a kid trying to hide their social media use from their parent or not feeling like they can go to their parent if they see something that's questionable
Mhm.
because they already did something wrong by looking at it without their parent involved.
And then it turns into this like keeping secrets, and then which could become very toxic really fast.
Yeah.
I will say this, you mentioned earlier, like communication with couples. I think communication with your kids, communication with with what your thoughts are or what they're thinking. I know my kids would come home and they would talk about what school was, and just because the way my brain worked, I would be like, well, what about this thought? Like instead of telling you what I'm telling them the exact opposite. And I could argue any side, but that's because I want them to think for themselves and have that communication with myself. So we have like healthy dialogue about it, which is fine. Doesn't mean we believe either way. It's like you're now as an adolescent trying to determine what your belief system is. And so let's talk about that. Let's look at it. Let's navigate. Let's approach every side. That. But going back to like social media or technology, it's like, hey, what have you noticed lately? What are you like? What's on your what are you searching? What have you noticed? This what have you seen on and I don't want to be careful that I don't get banned by, so I'm not going to say any specific. What did you notice on that videos? So,
I think, yeah, having a conversation about, you know, these are the things that they're finding. I trust you. This isn't about not trusting you. This is about algorithms and knowing that the algorithms have fed me some really questionable things. I can't imagine what they're feeding you. And I want to work together to make sure that you are enjoying all of the benefits of social media without experiencing some of the really severe consequences.
and even take us some time to maybe share some of those reels or some of those videos with your teenager. Hey, I saw this information, this interesting video, or like I saw this funny meme, right? Just like, and again, interacting, right? I think even now that I have adult children, right? They talk about how like between the ages of 14 to 18, they're like, oh, dad. And now, my 26-year-old is like, hey, dad. Right? This is like this change. But I kept that communication style open for that to happen. So
Yeah, I think if you shut down communication with adolescents,
mhm.
when something goes wrong, they are not going to feel okay to reach out to you.
Yeah. So then that's that healthy, like we talk about boundaries. You want them to be coming to you. You want them to have that person that hey, it's like that get out of jail free card, right? I've told my kids in the past, like, if you ever find yourself in a terrible situation and you need to call me and help me get you out of it, that's fine. And if you don't want me to, you can call me and be like, hey, I don't need you to ask questions. I just need help. I'm going to be there to help. I'm not going to
Mhm.
ask questions, and that's okay.
Yeah, because what, again, not a parent, but what I imagine as a parent I would want is if my kid were in a situation where it's late at night, they've broken curfew, they know they're already in trouble, but like something is sketchy
Mhm.
and they're in a situation they don't know how to navigate, I want to be the person they're going to call.
It reminds me of the time as a teenager, I backed into a car and I was like, Dad, I need to tell you something. I know you're going to be angry. I need help with this. And
Yeah.
he was like, okay. I hear you. Tell me what's going on. And we're not gonna, I just let me know how I can help you out of it. I was terrified. 17 years old, like, oh my goodness. I backed into this car and it's like the cops were called. It was a whole thing. But I prefaced it with that. And maybe that, for if any of our teenage listeners are listening, right, maybe they could be like, oh, well, that's a good thing to keep into your pocket, maybe talk with your parents about before you get into those situations. And parents, it's a good thing to talk with your teenager, your kid about before you get into those situations, right? I'd rather be proactive than reactive.
Yeah. And it's okay, I think, for teenagers to also say, when you talk to me like this, it doesn't make me feel like I can come to you if I were to be in a really dangerous situation.
Because teenagers become young adults and young adults become parents, and it's like you want to break this cycle of like what used to be to what it is now. What used to be could have been like, this is the rule and that's it, to now it's like, let's conversate about it, let's talk about it, let's navigate this, let's set the healthy boundaries so we can all come together and be healthy and hopeful for future generations.
And also the teenagers who have parents who don't respect boundaries, they become the adults that we are talking to about how to navigate being around your parents over the holidays.
Yeah.
And how to not get into a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you do get into a fight, leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, you and I both have had those conversations with some of our clients, especially closer we get to the holidays, or even right after the holidays, of like, there's Christmas and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there's just like, I don't know if I want to go back to Christmas. And it's like, if you don't feel appreciated, if you don't feel loved, if you don't feel respected, right? So like, I like what you said, like, let's have those conversations now so we're not having those conversations later. And I would like to say, like, if you need help having those conversations, right, there's therapists out there that do family work. There's people available that you can call and talk to whenever you need help to navigate those boundaries. Let that person be the mediator between you two and maybe help you talk the language and say what you need to say with like without the emotional response that sometimes happens. Yes, you can be angry. Yes, you can be hurt, and that's normal feelings. So let somebody else help you navigate that.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, I just want to say I appreciate this conversation, and I hope our listeners do too, right? Because this is so important. This is so much needed in the world we live today with everything that we got going on. Is there any like last words that you would like to say?
I just know that when I started working on boundaries, it really made a difference in my life, and I hope it's able to make a difference in others too.
Boundaries are life-changing.
Yeah.
And they're a continual work in progress.
Yes.
Continue work in progress, I know. And so if you need help, like finding assistance with boundaries, there's some books we're going to put into our chat and kind of help with that. There's therapists you can talk to, someone you can lean on, right? Maybe accountability. We didn't even talk about talk about your partner with all the code words, things like that. There's things you can do. And I'm hoping that this series, this topic today has been helpful for somebody. So thank you, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So this is our tea time with Tommy. Hope to see you again. Leave some comments in the chat and we will go from there. Thank you. Bye.